God is shifting things for you. Sometimes in life, it may look as if nothing is moving, as if the heavens are silent, and you feel forgotten in the middle of your struggle. But I want you to know today, God is never idle. Even when you cannot see it with your physical eyes, He is working behind the curtain of your life. The unseen hand of God is rearranging circumstances, moving people, and positioning opportunities so that your destiny can align with His perfect will. You may think you are stuck, but in reality, you are being prepared for a divine transition. Many times, we misinterpret delay as denial. We see obstacles and we think it's the end. But what feels like a closed door may only be God's way of protecting you from something less than His best. He is shifting things, relationships, seasons, opportunities, even battles. Because His plan for you is higher than your imagination. He said in His word, "My thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways." What looks confusing to you is clear to Him. What feels heavy to you is light in His hands. Do not be discouraged when you lose something or when people walk out of your life. Sometimes subtraction is the key to multiplication. God removes what hinders so that He can release what blesses. Think of Joseph, betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and imprisoned. But every setback was a setup for the palace. God was shifting things silently. And when the time was right, He brought Joseph from the prison to the throne in one moment. That same God is shifting your life. He has not forgotten you, and He has not abandoned His promise. You may feel like you're surrounded by storms. You may say, "Why is everything so hard right now?" But remember, before the new season begins, there must be a shaking. God shakes the old foundation so He can build something new. The shaking in your life is not punishment, it's preparation. He is aligning you for greater blessing, greater influence, and greater peace. The breaking you feel is making way for a new birthing. Your responsibility is to trust Him. Do not focus on what you see. Lift your eyes higher. Begin to declare, "God is shifting things for me. He is making crooked paths straight. He is opening doors that no man can shut." Faith is not seeing with your natural eyes, but believing with your spiritual heart that God is already at work. There is a divine acceleration coming. What you thought would take years will happen quickly, because when God shifts things, He does it suddenly. You may have sown in tears, but you will reap with joy. You may have walked in the wilderness, but He is leading you into a promised land. Do not give up. Hold your ground. God is shifting things for you even now, and soon you will step into the testimony that He has prepared. Trust that God is working behind the scenes, even when you cannot see it. This truth is one of the greatest anchors for the human heart, because life often confronts us with moments that appear silent, empty, and even hopeless. We pray, but it feels like heaven is quiet. We wait, but nothing seems to change. Yet, in those very moments when we assume nothing is happening, God is moving in the unseen realm. He is not only hearing your prayers, but He is arranging circumstances, shifting hearts, and orchestrating divine alignments that are beyond human understanding. The greatest miracles are often born in silence, in places where our natural eyes cannot detect His activity. Think of the seed hidden in the soil. When you look at the ground, you see nothing but dirt. You may even think the seed is dead, but beneath the soil, in a hidden realm, there is life. The roots are forming, the sprout is pushing, and the process is unfolding quietly. The moment you see the green shoot above the soil, it is simply the evidence of what has been happening all along in secret. Your life works in the same way. The promises of God are like seeds planted deep within your heart. You may not see growth yet, but it does not mean God has abandoned you. It means He is still at work beneath the surface, and in the fullness of time, what He began will break forth for all to see. Our human tendency is to equate silence with absence. When things are not visible, we assume God is far away. But His silence does not equal inactivity. He is the God who works in hidden spaces. He moves in ways that defy our timelines and expectations. When the Israelites were trapped at the Red Sea, with Pharaoh's army closing in behind them, it looked like all hope was gone. But in the unseen realm, God had already positioned the wind, prepared the path, and made the way through the sea. What seemed like the end was actually the setup for one of the greatest deliverances recorded in history. Trusting God when you cannot see requires faith. Faith is the bridge between your current reality and God's unseen activity. It does not deny the challenges you face, but it chooses to believe that God is greater than the challenge. Faith whispers, even though I cannot see the solution, I know the one who holds it. Even though I don't understand the process, I trust the God of the process. This trust keeps your spirit anchored when the storms of life try to uproot you. Consider also the story of Esther. To the human eye, her life seemed like a series of coincidences. An orphan girl rising to the palace, a queen chosen in a foreign land. But behind those so-called coincidences, God was orchestrating a deliverance plan for His people. Each step, each event, each delay was part of His hidden strategy. The book of Esther never once mentions the name of God, yet His fingerprints are everywhere in the narrative. That is how He often works in our lives. Unseen, unannounced, but undeniable when the outcome is revealed. When you feel discouraged because you cannot see progress, remind yourself that God specializes in hidden work. Just because you cannot trace His hand does not mean you cannot trust His heart. He is faithful to complete what He begins. He is not bound by human clocks or calendars. His timing is always perfect. And when the appointed moment arrives, His plans will unfold with clarity and power. Until then, your task is to trust, believe, and remain steadfast in hope. What looks invisible today will become undeniable tomorrow, because God has never stopped working on your behalf. Delays and closed doors are divine redirections, not denials. Many times in life, we find ourselves frustrated when our prayers seem unanswered, or when opportunities slip away that we thought were meant for us. We interpret those moments as failures, as though God has said no to our deepest desires. But in reality, those delays and closed doors often carry hidden blessings. They are not the end of your story, but the gentle hand of God steering you towards something better, something beyond what you imagined. His wisdom surpasses ours, and what feels like a disappointment today may prove to be divine protection tomorrow. Think of the times you longed for a relationship, a job, or a certain opportunity, but the door never opened. You may have cried, questioned, and wondered why God allowed it to pass you by. Later, perhaps you realized that if that relationship had worked, it would have broken you. If that job had been yours, it would have limited your growth. If that opportunity had come too soon, it would have crushed you under its weight. God's delays are not designed to destroy your hope, but to prepare your heart for something greater than you could ask or think. His "not yet" is always rooted in love, and His closed doors are walls of mercy guarding you from harm. One of the greatest examples is the life of Paul. On his missionary journeys, he tried to go into certain regions to preach, but the Spirit of God stopped him. It may have felt frustrating, because his intention was good. Why would God close the door to preaching His own gospel? Yet in hindsight, it became clear that God was redirecting him to Europe, where entire nations would be impacted. What looked like a restriction was actually a redirection into a greater assignment. In the same way, the doors you thought should have opened may simply be guiding you to the door that will lead you into your destiny. Delays are also tools in God's hands. When you experience waiting seasons, it is not wasted time. Waiting is God's classroom where patience, faith, and character are developed. The longer you wait, the deeper your roots grow, and the stronger your foundation becomes. A building with many stories requires a deep foundation. If the digging takes longer, it is because the structure is destined to rise higher. Likewise, the longer your delay, the greater the destiny that is being built. The waiting you endure today is strengthening you for the weight of blessing tomorrow. The story of Lazarus also teaches us this truth. When Jesus heard that Lazarus was sick, He delayed his arrival. To those watching, it seemed cruel, even neglectful. But Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. It is for the glory of God." The delay was intentional. Had He come immediately, Lazarus would have been healed. But through the delay, Lazarus was resurrected. The greater miracle required a greater wait. What feels like a delay in your life may be God setting the stage for something far more powerful than you expect. Closed doors and delays are not signs of rejection, but signs of divine direction. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" begin asking, "Lord, where are you leading me?" The path you thought was right may not have been safe. The opportunity you wanted may not have been your best. The timing you desired may not have been prepared. Trust that when God says no, it is always because He has a better yes waiting. So when you face those moments of disappointment, do not let your heart grow bitter. Do not allow frustration to cloud your vision. Lift your eyes and remember God's silence is not absence, and His closed doors are not rejection. They are redirections that are shaping your journey into a story far greater than your own plans could ever write. Subtraction in your life often makes room for God's multiplication. We naturally resist loss because as human beings, we equate subtraction with lack, with emptiness, with failure. When people walk away, when resources dry up, when opportunities vanish, our first instinct is to feel abandoned or forgotten. Yet in God's economy, subtraction is not always a negative event. Sometimes, it is the very tool He uses to prepare the soil of your life for a greater harvest. He removes what is temporary so that He can release what is eternal. He clears what is lesser so that He can establish what is greater. What looks like a painful loss to you may be a strategic step in His divine plan to multiply blessing, favor, and purpose. Think about the pruning of a tree. At first glance, pruning looks like destruction. The branches are cut back, the leaves are stripped, and the tree looks bare. But the gardener knows that pruning is not punishment, it is preparation. Those cuts allow the tree to channel its energy into producing more fruit. Without pruning, growth becomes stunted and the tree bears less than its potential. In the same way, when God prunes your life by subtracting certain relationships, possessions or positions, He is not trying to harm you. He is preparing you for abundance you cannot yet see. Consider the story of Gideon. When God called him to battle against the Midianites, Gideon had an army of 32,000 men. Yet God reduced his army, subtracting until only 300 remained. Human logic would see that as a disadvantage, but divine wisdom saw it as the setup for victory. Through subtraction, God made room for His power to multiply. The victory that followed left no doubt that it was the hand of God, not the strength of men. In your life, God may allow certain things to be stripped away, not because He wants you weaker, but because He wants His glory to shine brighter through your testimony. Subtraction also creates space for new beginnings. Many times, we cling to the familiar, even when it is limiting us. We hold tightly to relationships, jobs, or situations that are comfortable but not fruitful. When God subtracts them, it feels like the ground beneath us is shaking. But in truth, He is clearing away the old to make room for the new. Ruth's story reflects this. She lost her husband, her home, and her sense of security, but in that place of loss, God was positioning her for multiplication through Boaz and the lineage of Christ. What she lost was painful, but what she gained carried eternal significance. Even in nature, multiplication begins with subtraction. A seed must fall into the ground and die before it can produce fruit. Jesus Himself taught this principle. Unless a grain of wheat falls and is buried, it remains alone. But when it is buried, when it is subtracted from the visible, it multiplies into a harvest. The same applies to your journey. The things you lose are not the end, but the beginning of something greater. When you face seasons of subtraction, the key is perspective. Instead of mourning only what was taken, choose to believe that God is making room. He is not emptying you to leave you barren. He is emptying you to fill you with something better. Your subtraction is not a punishment, but a setup for increase. God's multiplication often looks impossible at the start, but when the breakthrough comes, you will look back and realize every loss was necessary for the abundance He planned. So, do not despise subtraction. Do not allow bitterness or despair to take root in your heart. Trust that each loss has purpose, each pruning has promise, and each subtraction has a multiplication attached to it. God never takes without the intention to give back greater. What He removes, He replaces with something beyond measure. Your season of subtraction is simply the preparation ground for your season of overflow. Every shaking is preparation for a new season of blessing. When life feels unstable, when the ground beneath your feet seems to tremble, and when everything you thought was secure begins to shift, it is easy to interpret those moments as destruction. You may wonder, why is everything falling apart? But often, What looks like chaos is really construction. God shakes what is temporary so He can establish what is unshakable. He allows certain structures to crumble so that new foundations can be laid. The shaking is not meant to break you. It is meant to prepare you for something greater. When God is about to move you into a new season, He often disrupts your comfort. We long for stability, but stability without growth leads to stagnation. Just like an eagle stirs its nest to push its young ones to fly, God sometimes shakes your environment so that you cannot stay in the old place. That shaking forces you to stretch your wings, to rise higher, and to embrace the next dimension of His plan. Without the shaking, you would remain in the nest, comfortable but limited. Through the shaking, He pushes you into your destiny. Consider the story of Israel leaving Egypt. Their world was shaken by plagues, by confrontation with Pharaoh, and by the uncertainty of the wilderness. Yet all of that shaking was preparation to walk into the promised land. God shook Egypt's power so that His people could experience freedom. What felt like upheaval was actually deliverance. The discomfort of leaving Egypt was necessary for the blessing of Canaan. In the same way, the shakings in your life are not random. They are the birth pains of a new season. Shaking also reveals what is truly secure. Imagine a house being tested by an earthquake. Whatever is built on sand will collapse, but what is built on rock will endure. When God allows shaking, He is revealing where your faith, your priorities, and your trust have been anchored. If they were built on temporary things, they may fall away, but that loss is not to harm you. It is to realign you. God wants your foundation to be rooted in Him, the unshakable rock. Once everything else has been removed, what remains is strong, pure, and able to carry the weight of new blessing. Sometimes shaking comes in the form of relationships ending, opportunities shifting, or dreams being redefined. These changes feel uncomfortable, but remember, pruning and shaking often go hand in hand. Just as a tree must be shaken for ripe fruit to fall, your life may be shaken so that what no longer serves you is released. The shaking makes room for harvest. Without it, you might cling to things that are no longer meant for your season. Look also at the early church. When persecution came, it shook the believers out of Jerusalem. At first, it seemed like tragedy, but that shaking scattered them to new regions where the gospel spread with power. The very shaking they feared became the vehicle of multiplication. What felt like loss became the doorway to expansion. Likewise, the shaking in your life may be positioning you for influence, opportunities, and blessings that would not have been possible otherwise. The key during shaking is to resist fear and embrace faith. Fear will convince you that the shaking means the end, but faith reminds you that the shaking is a sign of transition. God never allows shaking without attaching purpose to it. Every tremor in your life is loosening the grip of the old and making space for the new. So when you feel the ground moving, do not despair. Remember that God is still in control. He is not shaking you to harm you, but to prepare you. He is aligning you for increase, strengthening your roots, and opening the door to a season you could not step into without this preparation. What looks like shaking is really shaping, and what feels like loss is actually the setup for a new season of blessing. Faith declares God's promises even before they manifest. This is the essence of walking with God, to believe, to speak, and to stand on His word, even when every visible circumstance tells you the opposite. Faith is not passive hope. It is active confidence in the character of God. It dares to speak life into situations that appear dead. It dares to declare light in the midst of darkness. It dares to proclaim victory while still standing in the middle of the battle. Faith is not waiting until the miracle arrives to rejoice. It is rejoicing ahead of time because you trust the one who promised it. The Bible reminds us that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. That means faith takes what is invisible and treats it as though it is already tangible. When Abraham was told he would be the father of many nations, his body was old, and Sarah's womb was barren. By natural standards, the promise was impossible. Yet Abraham chose to believe, and not only to believe, but to declare what God had said. He began to identify himself with the promise, calling himself the father of many, even before a single child was born. That is what faith looks like, declaring the promise as reality before it manifests in the physical. Faith-filled declarations are powerful because they align your words with God's will. Your words have the ability to shape your atmosphere. When you speak in faith, you are not ignoring reality, you are invoking a higher reality. David declared, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Even while he was still a shepherd boy facing hardship, his declaration anchored his soul in God's provision long before he sat on the throne. Likewise, when you speak God's promises, you are reminding your spirit and your circumstances that His word is greater than what you see. There is an important principle here. What you declare in faith often determines what you experience in life. If your words constantly agree with fear, doubt, and defeat, you reinforce those realities in your heart. But if your words align with God's truth, you invite His power into your situation. Faith is not silent. Faith has a voice. It declares, "I am healed." Even when the diagnosis says otherwise, it declares, "I am blessed." Even when the bank account looks empty, it declares, "God is making a way." Even when every door appears closed, faith does not wait to see. Faith speaks because it already knows. Look at the example of the woman with the issue of blood. She had suffered for 12 years, but she said to herself, "If I only touch the hem of His garment, I will be healed." That was faith declaring the promise before it happened. Her words prepared her heart prepared her actions, and her actions positioned her for the miracle. When she touched Jesus, power flowed, and her faith declaration became her reality. Another example is found in the story of Joshua and the walls of Jericho. The people of Israel were instructed to march around the walls in silence for 6 days, and then shout on the 7th day. That shout was a declaration of victory before the walls had fallen. It was faith expressed through their voices, and when they shouted, the walls crumbled, proving that faith-filled declarations carry supernatural power. Faith requires persistence. You may declare God's promises for weeks, months, or even years before you see them fulfilled. But every time you speak, you are watering the seed of the word. Just as a farmer continues to water the ground before the harvest appears, you must continue to declare God's truth until the manifestation arrives. Your declarations are never wasted. They are building an atmosphere of expectation that will one day collide with God's timing. So when life tempts you to stay silent or to complain, choose instead to lift your voice in faith. Declare His promises boldly. Speak as though it is already done, because in the Spirit it already is. Faith declares before it sees, and in doing so, it creates the pathway for God's promises to manifest in your life. Divine shifts bring sudden breakthroughs and accelerated favor. There are moments in life when it feels as though nothing is moving, when progress seems slow, and when every prayer appears unanswered. Yet, in an instant, God can step in and change everything. One touch from His hand can accomplish more in a moment than years of human effort could produce. Divine shifts are not gradual processes. They are sudden interventions where heaven's timing collides with your situation, and what was once impossible becomes possible. The scriptures show us again and again that God specializes in sudden breakthroughs. Paul and Silas were in prison, their feet bound in chains, their future uncertain. Yet, at midnight, as they prayed and sang hymns, suddenly the foundations of the prison shook, the doors flew open, and every chain was broken. That was not a slow development. It was a divine shift. In one moment, their condition changed from bondage to freedom. That same God who opened prison doors is still working today, and He is able to bring sudden change in your life. Divine shifts also bring accelerated favor. What would normally take years can happen in a fraction of the time when God is involved. Joseph's journey is a clear example. He spent years in prison, forgotten and overlooked. But in a single day, God elevated him to the second most powerful position in Egypt. That promotion was not gradual. It was a divine shift that propelled him into his destiny. In your own life, God can turn obscurity into influence, lack into abundance, sorrow into joy, and struggle into victory, all in a moment of divine acceleration. We must also recognize that divine shifts are not accidents. They are the result of God's perfect timing. Sometimes, He allows us to go through long seasons of waiting, where it feels as though progress is stalled. But those seasons are not wasted. They are seasons of preparation. When the divine shift comes, it always finds you ready for what He has prepared. just like a slingshot must be pulled back before it launches forward. You may feel as though you have been pulled into delay, but that tension is only building momentum for the sudden release. When divine shifts come, they not only bless you but also those connected to you. Peter experienced this when he cast his net at the word of Jesus. He had toiled all night and caught nothing, but at one command, his net overflowed with fish. The catch was so great that he had to call others to help carry the blessing. That is the nature of divine shifts. They produce abundance that overflows, favor that extends, and breakthroughs that touch everyone around you. It is important to live in expectancy of sudden change. Too often, we condition ourselves to believe that things will always remain the same, that progress must always be slow. But faith invites us to prepare for acceleration. Faith says, this could be the day that God shifts my life. When you walk with that mindset, you are ready to recognize the opportunities He places before you and respond when He moves. Your breakthrough may not come in the way you imagine. Divine shifts often arrive unexpectedly, through doors you never considered, through people you never anticipated, and in ways you never designed. That is why it is vital to remain open to God's methods. He is not limited by your plans, your resources, or your timeline. His shifts are supernatural, and they carry a signature that no human effort could duplicate. So, as you wait and as you trust, remember this: divine shifts can happen at any moment. The same God who moved suddenly for Paul, Silas, Joseph, and Peter is preparing sudden breakthroughs for you. When the shift comes, it will not only change your circumstances but also accelerate you into blessings, influence, and favor that testify of His power and goodness. Life may bring silence, delays, losses, shakings, and seasons of waiting, but through it all, God is weaving a divine plan that far exceeds human understanding. What looks hidden is God working behind the scenes. What feels like denial is a redirection towards something better. What seems like subtraction is preparation for multiplication. Every shaking is not destruction, but the groundwork for a new beginning. Faith sustains us as we declare His promises, even before they manifest, and when His timing arrives, He brings sudden shifts that release breakthrough and favor beyond imagination. So stand firm, keep believing, and lift your eyes with expectation, because God is shifting things for you, and soon, you will walk into the season He has prepared.